Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Love may be in the air, but we're diving deep into a different kind of connection today.
Ooh, intriguing.
We're talking about the power of questions.
Yeah.
And to guide us, we've got some fascinating insights from Allan Pease, a world-renowned expert in, well, all things body language and communication.
Oh, I love his work. Always so insightful.
Right, we're actually diving into excerpts from his book La Respuestas de las Preguntas, which translates to The Answer is in the Questions.
So, like, straight to the point, huh? I like it.
And you know what's really interesting? Pease argues that questions are so much more than just a way to get information. He sees them as this secret weapon for persuasion.
A secret weapon. Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more.
He even says they can help you uncover hidden motivations, like what really makes people tick.
Now, that's powerful.
It is, and he gets into some techniques used by top salespeople and network marketers, stuff that we can actually apply in our own lives.
So we're getting the inside scoop, the pro tips.
Exactly. Now, one thing that Pease talks about is this idea of the law of averages. Can you explain that a bit, like how it works and why it's so important?
Okay, so the law of averages basically means that if you consistently do the same thing in the same situation, you're going to get, like, a predictable set of results, right?
Right. So consistency is key.
Exactly. Peace actually uses this great example from when he was a kid, selling sponges door to door.
Wow, going way back.
Yeah, so he tracked his averages, like how many doors he knocked on, how many people actually stopped to listen, how many ended up buying a sponge. And get this, just by tracking those numbers, he was able to, shift his mindset.
Instead of focusing on, each individual rejection.
Exactly. He saw the big picture. It took the sting out of those no's because he knew, over time, you'd hit those sales targets.
It's all about playing the long game.
Right. That's the power of understanding your averages. You see those patterns, the trends, and you can adjust your approach to get where you need to be.
So it's about strategy, not just luck.
Exactly. Now, I can already see how this ties into persuasion. It's about being persistent, not giving up after a few setbacks.
Okay, but I'm still curious about how questions fit into all of this.
Well, Pease lays out this four-step technique he calls the 4 keys. And it's all about moving from, a cold start to a yes. The first key is break the ice. And honestly, this is where a lot of people totally mess up. They either stumble through small talk or they just dive right into a pitch before making any real connection with the other person.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. Makes you cringe just thinking about it.
Right. And that's where the second key comes in. Find the hot button. It's all about understanding what really motivates the other person. Pease calls this the major motivating factor, or MMF.
So it's not just about what they say they want, but what's really driving their decisions deep down.
Yeah. Is it money? More time with family? A desire to, help others? What makes them tick?
It's about figuring out their why.
Exactly. And that's where the magic of questions comes in. Pete says it's not about guessing their NMF, but uncovering it through strategic questions.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. I've heard about these questions, the 5 golden questions.
You got it.
What's so special about them? And, how do they actually work?
Well, think of these 5 questions as this, gentle but powerful drill. It guides someone to really articulate their desires, their fears, what they truly want.
So they're basically discovering it for themselves.
Exactly. And that makes them way more open to solutions that actually fit their needs. It's less about selling and more about guiding them towards a solution that really resonates with what they actually want.
I love that. It's like a process of self-discovery.
Totally. And that's what makes these questions so powerful. So, ready for the big reveal?
Hit me with those golden questions.
Okay, question number 1. What is your number 1 priority?
Okay, straight to the point.
Question 2. Why did you choose that one?
Getting deeper. I like it.
Question 3. Why is that important to you?
Ooh, okay, peeling back those layers.
Now, question number 4. What are the consequences of not having that opportunity?
Uh-oh, starting to feel the pressure.
And finally, the closer, question number 5. Why would that worry you?
Each one really builds on the last, huh? It's like drawing them deeper into their own, thoughts and feelings.
That's exactly it.
It's brilliant. But do you have any, real-life examples of how these questions actually play out?
Oh, yeah. Pease shares some really compelling stories in his book. One that really sticks with me is about this guy, Ronald, who seemed super enthusiastic about this, network marketing opportunity. He was nodding, asking questions, the whole 9 yards. But in the end, he never actually joined.
So even though he seemed engaged, something was missing.
Totally. And when they used the 5 golden questions, it became clear that his real motivation, his MMF, was helping others. But that part, never came up in the presentation.
So even if someone's excited on the surface, you might totally miss the mark if you don't uncover their true why.
You got it. And it highlights how important it is to really dig deep, to go beyond that initial enthusiasm and figure out what truly motivates someone. And sometimes, the answers can be really surprising. Like there's another story about Frank, this successful dentist, who seemed to have it all: a thriving practice, a beautiful home. But get this, he was deeply unhappy.
Wow, really? So I'm guessing the 5 golden questions revealed something he wasn't even admitting to himself?
Dingo. Through those questions, he realized that what he really craved deep down was more time with his family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that realization actually led him to make a huge life change.
That's powerful.
It is. It just goes to show that the right questions can unlock things that we didn't even know were there. They could spark some pretty amazing transformations.
It really makes you think, like, are there areas in your own life where you might be settling or just going through the motions?
Right. Maybe it's time to start asking ourselves some tough questions.
I think you're onto something there.
Me too. It's kind of crazy how just asking the right questions can, lead to such big, self-discoveries. But you know what else is interesting? Pease doesn't just stop at the words we say. He goes deeper into the, often overlooked world of body language.
Yeah, body language can totally speak volumes, sometimes, like, even more than words.
Right. And I know from experience, misreading those nonverbal cues can cause some serious misunderstandings.
Ugh, yeah, tell me about it.
Pease makes this point that, understanding body language isn't about interpreting one gesture in isolation. It's about seeing those clusters of signals, right? Like someone crossing their arms, maybe they're just cold, not necessarily closed off. But if they're also frowning, avoiding eye contact, leaning away, okay, now that paints a whole different picture.
It's like reading a whole sentence instead of just focusing on one word.
Exactly. You got to have the context to get the full meaning.
Makes sense. Now, Pease talks a lot about the arms crossed gesture. What's the deal with that? What insights does he share?
Well, he found that when people cross their arms during presentations, they tend to remember less, less of the information, and they're more critical of the speaker.
Whoa, so it's not just about how they feel, it's actually affecting how they process information. That's a pretty strong argument for being mindful of our own body language when we're trying to get our point across.
It really is. And it shows just how much is going on beneath the surface. All this nonverbal communication that's shaping how we see and interact with the world around us.
It's like this hidden language we're all speaking.
Exactly.
Now, Pease also mentions that women tend to be better at picking up on these subtle cues than men. Why is that?
Well, he explains that women's brains are just wired differently. They're more attuned to those nonverbal signals, probably because of, evolution and stuff. Women were the primary caregivers, so they had to be super sensitive to the needs of their babies and the tribe.
So, ladies, trust your gut. You're probably picking up on things that many men wouldn't even notice.
Yeah. And understanding these differences in communication styles is key to bridging those gaps, avoiding those unnecessary arguments and misunderstandings.
It's not like men are trying to be insensitive. Their brains just work differently when it comes to those tiny facial expressions and body language shifts.
Exactly. It's just different wiring.
Okay, so we need to be aware of those subtle cues, but how can we actually improve our own nonverbal communication? What tips does Pease give?
He stresses how crucial first impressions are, and those initial nonverbal signals can really make or break a connection. He talks about simple things like smiling. Just smiling can make you instantly seem more approachable.
Yeah, I can see that.
Using open palm gestures to convey sincerity, being mindful of personal space, respecting those invisible boundaries that make people feel comfortable.
He'd also be this fascinating point about handshakes. Apparently, how you position your palm can actually communicate dominance, submission, or equality.
Yeah, it's wild, right? Most people aren't even aware they're doing it.
I know, I had no idea.
He recommends aiming for a neutral handshake with palms parallel to project mutual respect and openness.
It makes you wonder how many times I've accidentally sent the wrong message with a weak handshake or a death grip. So it's not just about the pressure, but also the angle of your palm.
Totally. Turning your palm down can seem dominant, while turning it up can signal submission. It's all about finding that balance.
Wow, it's amazing how such a small gesture can have such a big impact on how we're perceived.
It really is. And it's a good reminder that even the smallest gestures can make a big difference. It's about that sweet spot, conveying confidence and respect without coming across as aggressive or, too submissive.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier that Pease talks about mirroring as a technique to build rapport. What's that about, and why is it so effective?
Mirroring is basically the idea that we naturally, subconsciously, mirror the behavior of people we like and connect with. It's just a human thing. So if you want to build rapport with someone, subtly matching their posture, gestures, even tone of voice can create this instant feeling of, like, connection. Think about when you're, like, having coffee with a close friend. You lean in when they lean in. Your tone might even shift to match theirs.
It's like you're speaking their language, but non-verbally, which makes them feel more comfortable and understood.
Exactly. But you got to be careful, because it can backfire if it's not genuine.
Yeah, you don't want to come across as fake or creepy.
Right. Pease warns against being too obvious or forced about it. Subtlety is key. It's about being observant and respectful, not mimicking their every move.
Okay, got it. Subtle mirroring, check. Now, another area Pease gets into is how men and women communicate emotions differently.
Right. He says women are more expressive with their faces. They use a wider range of microexpressions to show their feelings. Probably because, back in the day, as caregivers, being attuned to those subtle emotional cues was essential for survival.
Makes sense. We had to be able to read the babies. So, guys, if you want to connect with a woman, pay attention to her facial expressions. Show her you're tuned in to how she's feeling.
It can make a huge difference in creating that sense of understanding and empathy. Men, on the other hand, tend to express their emotions more through their body language.
So, for us ladies, it's less about analyzing every facial expression and more about noticing those subtle shifts in posture or gestures. Like if he suddenly crosses his arms or turns away, it might mean he's feeling uncomfortable, even if he says everything's fine.
Exactly. Tease recommends that women trying to connect with men should try to, like, tone down their facial expressions a bit and pay more attention to a body language. This helps create a sense of balance and understanding.
So it's not about one being right or wrong. It's about understanding those nuances and adapting.
Right. And Pease even suggests these differences are rooted in, evolution. Men, as hunters and warriors, learn to suppress their emotions to avoid showing weakness.
Showing fear or sadness wouldn't exactly be helpful in a fight or flight situation.
Nope. While women, as nurturers and caregivers, develop that heightened sensitivity to nonverbal cues to understand the needs of their children and the tribe.
It's a survival skill.
Exactly.
But the takeaway is that there's no one right way to communicate. It's about understanding those different styles and adapting. Now, Pease also talks about the importance of pacing in communication. What's that all about?
Pacing is all about setting the rhythm of the conversation, like matching someone's speech rate and tone of voice to create this feeling of harmony and synchronicity. When you pace someone well, they feel more at ease and connected to you.
So if someone's talking slowly and thoughtfully, you wouldn't want to jump in with like a rapid fire response. That would feel off.
Exactly. It would create this imbalance and could make them feel like you're not really listening. Pease also suggests using, like, bridging phrases to keep the conversation flowing and encourage the other person to elaborate.
Like what kind of phrases?
Simple things, like which means, or, for example, they act as these gentle prompts to keep them talking and revealing more of their thoughts and feelings. You're guiding them to dig deeper without directly asking questions.
I like that. It feels less intrusive.
Right, and it's especially helpful when dealing with people who are shy or don't say much. He also talks about the power of head nodding.
I do that all the time, just to show I'm listening.
Right, but it's not just about agreeing. Head nodding can also encourage the other person to keep talking and create good feelings. It's a subtle but effective way to show you're listening and interested, which makes the speaker feel more confident and engaged.
It's like a nonverbal way of saying, tell me more. I'm really into what you're saying.
Exactly, and it's such a simple technique that anyone can use to improve their listening skills. And speaking of listening, he mentions using encouraging phrases to show you're following along and genuinely interested in what they're saying.
So like what kind of phrases are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
Things like "I see" or "tell me more," or even just a simple "that's interesting." These little cues show that you're engaged and want to hear more.
It's like you're dropping little conversational breadcrumbs to keep them going and feeling appreciated.
That's a great way to put it. And it's especially important when you can't rely on those nonverbal cues, like during a phone call. Now, when it comes to making people feel comfortable, he emphasizes eye contact, but not in a creepy way.
Yeah, there's definitely a line between engaging eye contact and staring someone down. So how do you strike that balance?
Pease suggests this technique where you point to something on a visual aid while speaking and then lift your pen to the bridge of your nose, maintaining eye contact through the top of your glasses.
That's clever. It draws their gaze upward naturally.
Exactly. It's a subtle way to increase eye contact without being creepy. He also says to avoid pointing directly at people with your finger. which can seem aggressive.
Yeah, I can see how that could create a negative vibe. What's the alternative?
An open palm gesture, it feels more welcoming and inclusive.
It's like extending a hand instead of pointing a weapon.
Such a powerful difference. Now, moving beyond just body language, Pease also gives some tips for what he calls dressing for success.
You mean like dress for the job you want, not the job you have?
Kinda. But he emphasizes thinking about your audience and the situation. Your clothes should convey the message you want to send, whether it's competence, trustworthiness, or approachability.
So it's about dressing strategically to make the right impression.
Exactly. It might mean dressing it more for a business meeting or going casual for a social event. He does make an interesting point about how, like, Richard Branson and Bill Gates can get away with dressing down because they've already made it, you know?
They've earned the right to break the rules.
Right. But for the rest of us, it's important to dress in a way that aligns with our goals and the expectations of the people we're interacting with.
It's about showing you respect their time and attention.
Exactly.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm getting this crash course in nonverbal communication, and it's making me realize how much I've been missing.
It's amazing how much we communicate without saying a word.
It's like a secret language we're all speaking, whether we realize it or not.
And the more you understand that language, the better you can connect with others.
Absolutely. And, it's fascinating how much we communicate without even realizing it. Like all those little nonverbal cues can really make or break a connection.
It's so true. And we're often so focused on like what we're saying that we totally forget about, the messages our body's sending.
Yeah, I've definitely had some awkward moments because of that.
I think we all have. It makes you realize how much room there is for miscommunication.
Oh, absolutely.
But the good news is, like, becoming more aware of these cues can seriously improve our communication, not just at work, but in our personal lives, too.
That's a good point. Yeah, imagine being able to, like, actually read your partner's body language or understand why your teenager is rolling their eyes at you.
Right. It could be a game changer for all kinds of relationships.
For sure. Now, Piz does make a point of saying it's not about becoming like a master manipulator, right?
Oh, absolutely not. It's about using these techniques ethically and authentically.
Yeah.
He's really clear about that. The goal is to build genuine connections, not to, like, trick people or control them.
And I really appreciate that about his approach. It's about using this knowledge for good to build those bridges and have more meaningful interactions.
That's exactly it. Recognizing that communication is a two-way street, and we can all benefit from being more attuned to those, both verbal and nonverbal cues.
This whole deep dive has been so insightful.
Hasn't it?
I feel like I have this whole new set of tools to communicate better and build stronger relationships.
I think that's a pretty common experience. Like, we often go through life on autopilot without really paying attention to those subtle ways we're communicating.
Yeah, I get that.
But by becoming more conscious of those cues, we can become more intentional and effective communicators.
So, what's the biggest takeaway you hope listeners will get from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing to remember is that communication is a skill.
Okay, yeah.
And like any skill, it can be learned and improved with practice. So by paying attention to, like, our own body language and becoming more aware of those nonverbal cues from others, we can totally transform how we interact with the world around us.
It's about being more mindful, more present, more attuned to that like subtle dance of communication.
I love that. The subtle dance of communication.
Right.
Beautifully said. And remembering that the most powerful communication often goes beyond just words.
So to all our listeners out there, I encourage you to try out some of these techniques this week. See how people are using their bodies to communicate, pay attention to your own nonverbal cues, and, most importantly, see how these insights can help you build those deeper, more meaningful connections in all parts of your life.
And remember, this deep dive might be ending, but the journey of self-discovery never does.
So true.
Keep asking those tough questions, keep observing, keep listening, and most importantly, keep connecting. Who knows what hidden truths and amazing connections you might find along the way.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the power of questions. Until next time, keep those conversations flowing and those connections strong.